We told they'd change the world, but nobody mentions the world fought back with a vengeance. Behind the stained glass windows and golden icons lies a series of endings so brutal they'd make a Viking wince. From being flayed alive to literal target practice, we're looking at 15 of the darkest, most agonizing tragedies suffered by the men who followed the carpenter. It turns out being a foundation stone of a new era usually involves getting crushed by the masonry. 1. Peter the Apostle. Legend says when Peter was sentenced to death in Rome, he made a final bizarre request. He didn't think he was worthy to die in the same manner as his mentor, so he insisted on being crucified upside down. The Romans, never ones to pass up extra cruelty, were happy to oblige. It's the ultimate act of humility, though hanging by your ankles while the blood rushes to your head is a pretty intense way to prove a point. 2. Andrew the fisherman. Peter's brother didn't have it much easier in Greece. He was tied, not nailed, to an X-shaped cross, known today as the St. Andrew's cross. The tied part wasn't a mercy, it was designed to make the agony last as long as possible. He reportedly stayed alive for 2 days, using his final breaths to preach to the crowd that gathered to watch him expire. That is some serious commitment to a closing monologue. 3. James the Greater. James has the grim distinction of being the first of the 12 apostles to be martyred. King Herod Agrippa had him executed by the sword in Jerusalem around 44 AD. In a strange twist of obscure fate, one of the men who accused James was so moved by his courage at the trial that he converted on the spot and asked to be executed right alongside him. Talk about a successful, if final, recruitment drive. 4. John the Evangelist. John is often called the apostle who got away, but not for lack of trying by his enemies. Tradition holds that he was plunged into a vat of boiling oil in Rome and miraculously walked out unscathed. After the deep fry method failed, the authorities gave up and exiled him to the island of Patmos. He's the only one of the group to have likely died of old age, proving that sometimes being extra crispy is just a step toward retirement. 5. Philip the Apostle. Philip took his message to Phrygia in modern-day Turkey, where he ran afoul of a local cult that worshipped a giant snake. After successfully converting the governor's wife, the angry officials had him arrested and tortured. He was reportedly scourged and then crucified, not through the hands but through the thighs. It's an anatomical nightmare that puts a very literal spin on no pain, no gain. 6. Bartholomew the Flayed. If there's a trophy for the worst way to go, Bartholomew wins it. While preaching in Armenia, he was sentenced to be flayed alive, meaning his skin was removed while he was still conscious. In Renaissance art, he's often depicted holding his own skin like a discarded coat. It is arguably the most visually extreme, dark, and intensely visceral image in all of religious history, but a terrifying reality for the man involved. 7. Thomas the Doubter. Famous for needing proof, Thomas ended up providing the ultimate proof of his faith in India. While praying in a cave, he was pierced by the spears of 4 soldiers. Today, a cathedral stands over the spot where he fell, but his legacy remains one of the most distant travels of the group. He went from doubting the resurrection to facing an army on the other side of the known world. 8. Matthew the Tax Collector. The man who once sat at a comfortable desk for the Roman government met a sharp end in Ethiopia. While some traditions say he was burned or stoned, the most common account is that he was staked to the ground and beheaded. It's a reminder that in the ancient world, changing your career path from taxman to evangelist didn't exactly improve your life expectancy. 9. James the Less. Not to be confused with the other James, this one stayed in Jerusalem and became a major leader. However, the local religious authorities eventually grew tired of him. They took him to the pinnacle of the temple and threw him off. When he survived the fall, they finished him off with a fuller's club, a heavy wooden tool used for thickening wool. It's the ultimate insult to injury finish. 10. Jude Thaddeus. The patron saint of lost causes found himself in a lost cause in Persia. He traveled alongside Simon the Zealot, and both were martyred together. Jude was reportedly beaten to death with a club or executed with a halberd, a terrifying spear-axe hybrid. It's ironic that the man people pray to when everything is hopeless met an end that was, well, entirely hopeless. 11. Simon the Zealot. Simon's end is a matter of gruesome debate. While some say he was crucified, the most enduring and terrifying tradition claims he was sawn in half, longitudinally. This particular method was a favorite of ancient tyrants because it kept the victim alive and conscious until the saw reached the chest. It's a literal split decision that no one would ever want to be a part of. 12. Matthias the Replacement. After Judas Iscariot vacated his seat, Matthias was elected to fill the gap. His reward for winning the lottery was a trip to Ethiopia, or Jerusalem depending on the source, where he was stoned and then beheaded. He's the only apostle who wasn't personally called by Jesus during his life, but he certainly paid the same membership fee as the rest of them. 13. Judas Iscariot. The most famous tragedy was self-inflicted. After betraying his friend for 30 pieces of silver, Judas was consumed by a guilt that couldn't be spent. He famously hanged himself, but the biblical account in the book of Acts adds a darker, more obscure detail. He fell headlong in a field, and he burst asunder, spilling his guts across the ground. It's a visceral, messy end for history's most hated middleman. 14. Paul of Tarsus. While not one of the original 12, he's the bonus apostle who did the most legwork. As a Roman citizen, he was spared the creative tortures like crucifixion or skinning. Instead, he was granted the mercy of a quick beheading in Rome under Emperor Nero. Legend says his severed head bounced 3 times, and a spring of water bubbled up at each spot. Even in death, Paul was overachieving.
15. The group legacy. Perhaps the biggest tragedy is that we don't know the exact where or how for several of these men. Historical records from the 1st century are spotty, and much of what we know comes from tradition and martyrologies written centuries later. They disappeared into the corners of the earth, India, Ethiopia, Scythia, becoming legends in lands that had never heard of Galilee. They lived as outcasts and died as targets, leaving behind a world that would eventually build cathedrals in their names. History isn't just a collection of noble ideas, it's a trail of blood left by people who believed in something more than their own safety. These 12 men went from fishing boats and tax booths to the business end of the Roman Empire's most creative executioners. We like to think we'd have their courage, but most of us complain if the Wi-Fi drops for 10 minutes. Next time you see a beautiful statue of an apostle, look closer. They're usually holding the very tool that was used to end them. See you next time, and try to keep your head on your shoulders, unlike Matthew.